Hey everybody, I'm Sierra.
And I'm Ben.
And welcome back to another episode of The Unsolved Couple, where every week Ben and I recap one of the original gateway drugs into true crime.
Unsolved mysteries.
All right, babe, I have another podcast recommendation for you and all of our listeners. It's Crime and Coffee Couple Podcast. They are not only incredible storytellers, but they are fun, and you definitely feel like you are sitting around the coffee table enjoying an afternoon with a couple of friends.
Looking for a true crime podcast with a cozy yet dark vibe to binge?
Do you try to support mom and pop shops over huge franchises? Then maybe Crime and Coffee Couple is right for you.
I'm Allison.
And I'm Mike. Every week, Allison delivers a new fascinating true crime story that she spent hours researching.
With each episode, we'll lead you into the dark corners of lesser-known cases, balancing chilling stories with respect and compassion for the victims.
You'll get to know a little bit about us and our true feelings about these terrible monsters. Listeners tell us it feels like they're sitting around the coffee table with their best friends.
Join us every Sunday at the Crime and Coffee Couple. Grab yourself a cup and pull up a chair.
So go spend your Sundays with Allison and Mike over at Crime and Coffee Couple Podcast. Okay, well, we are here recapping what this is season 2 episode. Are we at episode 13 already?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was 13.
Yeah, I believe so. Let me pull
What did
up.
you think of this one?
I thought this was a good one. I actually, I had several questions while we were watching. There was one story that was, yeah. I mean, that's.
But there was some wild stories in this one.
Mhm.
It was interesting.
Yeah. Just for and we can make this quick. Are you up to date on any of the news that's happening right now in the world of I don't even want to say true crime. I just want to say in the world of crime and drug. There's some big headline cases P. Diddy's case is getting ready to go to trial. The Karen Reed, does that name ring a bell to you?
No, I've never heard of Karen.
No,
I will say this. I continue to see as I scroll through, I've said this, I scroll through news at times.
Yeah.
And I've seen that there's some lady that is retrying. There's a retrial.
Retrial in Boston.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see it. I never click on it and read it.
Yeah.
Because I don't care and I don't want to learn them. I don't want to catch up on something that's in a retrial.
Yeah.
And true crime's just not my thing, as everyone already knows.
Yeah.
So I skip that one at all times. So
Okay.
I do know that there is a lady getting a retrial, but I actually I'm 100% honest here, people. I have zero idea what she even did.
Yeah.
I don't know
what she's being accused of, you mean?
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. That's fair. That is fair. I don't know if she murdered someone. I'm going to guess because that's usually what makes national headlines. But who it is?
They were like, this lady was jaywalking, loitering.
And not to sound rude, but it's not that I don't care. It's just I don't care to dive into
It's not intriguing enough to you to go to the next level.
To dive into the story. Because learning a story is work.
Yeah, fair.
Catching up on everything.
But we're getting ready to, the Lori Day Vallow trial just wrapped up. She's got another one coming up here in Arizona. You do know a little bit of that one. Yeah, because she was found guilty of conspiring to murder her husband. And then at the same time.
But then it wasn't her brother-in-law or wasn't
her brother-in-law was the one, or her brother's the one that pulled the trigger. But at some point, she's really close with her niece or her cousin or something. And her husband was kind of like, hey, I'm a little concerned with some of the rhetoric that you and your family member Lori are into. And he was followed by a Jeep and shot at. So there was an attempted.
I do remember. Yeah. Because I did read something on that case when it first broke.
Wasn't that during COVID that the kids were missing and stuff? So we weren't, there was a lot of downtime.
Yeah.
So, and then the Idaho 4 trial is getting ready to start too. So there's a lot going on.
I'm kind of in the same boat on that one.
You kind of knew about it a little bit in the beginning.
Well, no, I knew a lot about it. That one. Intrigued me. I remember the day it broke, and then I read the arrest affidavit, like the evidence that they had. So I was into it because I was curious of why this guy. But now that it's gone to trial, I see that it's going to trial.
You just want to know what the verdict is when it's done.
I don't read anything about it. I know there's been multiple things. I won't even click on it and read it.
Yeah.
I'm like, nope, I'll move. I'll wait for the verdict and okay. All right.
Yeah. And I want to talk about this later because I don't want to drown out too much. But then there was the report that a woman who had been missing for a huge amount of time.
Yeah, I was going to get into that.
Yeah, we'll get into that later. So I will get us started then so we can get rocking and rolling on our first story about Cynthia Anderson. And this is labeled as missing person on Unsolved Mysteries. In 1980, 22-year-old Cindy, as she was known by her friends and family, Anderson was plagued by several bizarre and frightening dreams in which she was abducted from her home and murdered by a stranger. She told her mother, Margaret, about them, but didn't take them seriously. The nightmares continued to plague her for the next year. On August 4th, 1981, Cindy arrived at the legal offices where she worked as a secretary. During the morning, she normally worked alone as the attorneys would have been at trial. She always kept the door locked, and she even had an alarm button placed at her desk so that if anything was to happen, it would alert the shop next door. So I, at first thought when I watched this the first time that this was just because maybe she was paranoid. And then I actually, watching it again, I'm like, oh, this girl, I think I missed the first part where there was no one in the office in the morning. Because it looks like in the reenactment.
They didn't say that.
Okay, it looks like in the reenactment, we're going to go on later, that the attorneys just kind of come back from lunch or something like that. And I've worked secretarial work before. You usually don't have the front door locked. But it seems as if she actually did quite a bit more for them. She handled their billing. I think she did a lot of their paperwork. So when she was there, she was the only person there. And she had the front door locked and this little alert button. I think at the end of the day, it was just a security measure. I don't think it had to do with her paranoia. I don't even want to say she was paranoid.
Yeah.
I had a hard time connecting the dreams to what goes on to happen.
I kind of had a little bit of a problem with, they made a big deal of the dreams. They then also say that button was, they allude, but they don't say that it was installed just for her. Like, or was it installed for the secretary?
Was it installed for the fact that you have a 20-something or even potentially, 17, 18-year-old girl working alone and she might need something at some point. Anyways, that's just kind of it alluded to the fact that it seemed like this was almost her being paranoid, but it seemed when I did more of a research that this was kind of like their standard operating procedures, as some might say in law enforcement. I don't know if you've heard that term before or not.
No, never.
No, you haven't.
Never.
At noon, two of her coworkers, which were two attorneys, arrived to find the office empty. The doors were locked, the mail was in, and the radio, lights, and air conditioning were all turned on, which were things she was all responsible for. One coworker was surprised to find that the book Cindy was reading was opened. Okay, you guys.
I know.
I will tell you this because they made a big deal about it in Unsolved Mysteries, but this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Cindy was reading a book and it was opened out to a violent part so she was reading a romance novel. Okay. My romance novel girlies are dark romance novel girls. This must have been the early days. I tried really hard to see if I could find out what book she was reading. Because I don't think the romance novels right now that are out there would have been what this girl was reading. But
no.
In the romance novel, the heroine of the story, I think, is kidnapped or something at knife point. And her book is left open to that page. And the attorney that's interviewed, which was, I'm guessing was one of her bosses, was like really alarmed by this. It gave a really eerie feeling. I don't think this had anything to do left, right, or center with what was happening.
This did not.
I was like, I was expecting that to come in later, and it never comes up again. So they want you to be very well aware that this literally looks like they walked into the office. I even related that like there was a nail polish set up, her book, and like a water or a little snack or something. She had her own little separate room that at times she would go back in and take little breaks or work on like and step away from the phones, whatever. It looks like she just, and I hate using this term, vanished into thin air because that doesn't happen. But it's almost like they walked in and she could have been sitting there and was just poof, gone. Do you get what I'm saying? You're staring at me like I've got 3 heads.
You're staring at me.
Well, why are you sitting like that, you weirdo?
Sitting like what?
You know exactly what you're doing. Anyways, it appears that she may have been abducted despite having all of the doors locked and an alarm set to notify the store next door. So yeah, when the attorneys showed up, the front door was locked.
From the inside.
Yep. When investigating this case, police found that the only missing items were Cindy's car keys and her purse, but there was no evidence of forced entry or struggle in the office. Based on the fact that no calls were answered by her after 10 a.m., it is believed that she went missing around this time. Foul play is suspected in her disappearance as she has never been found. Okay.
Right.
Robert comes back on screen at this point and says this. I wrote it down for us. Are you ready?
Oh, I'm ready. I love good quotes from Robert Stack.
There was no body, no farewell letter, no hint where she had gone or why. Were Cindy's dreams a premonition of a terrible fate? For 8 years, this case has baffled the police and Cindy's family. Was this young girl abducted? Was she murdered? Could she be alive somewhere suffering from amnesia? Or did she simply walk away to start a new life? Cindy's family has no reason for her disappearance. They cannot justify it in their minds, especially because she was raised in a strict religious environment, was planning on quitting her job in a few weeks, had got accepted to a Bible college that she had planned to attend with her boyfriend. Her father, Michael, weirdly enough, however, notices that she had been starting to diet and focus on her appearance, calling her trying to be a debutante.
I was hoping you would say
Of course, I'm going to say that.
I was ready for it if you didn't.
For her around that time of her disappearance and wants to know if that has anything to do with anything.
I don't know, but the dad is I've read later about him and it breaks my heart.
It does. I will say, when you watch this on Unsolved Mysteries, it comes off as a little cringe.
But I don't
think
that's the case at all.
So, and this is the other thing. I read on the Unsolved Mysteries, unsolved.com has every episode, they have a comment section afterwards. And that actually, a lot of people share stories about.
Yeah, I've gotten into it before on some of the stories.
Yeah. And there was a girl in particular that said she grew up in the same town. She was friends with Cindy. Their families knew each other. And that while Unsolved Mysteries and a few other people that have done this focus heavily on the fact that they were fundamental Christians and very strict in some ways, that Cindy actually really had a love and a fondness for going to church. And that at that time, being kind of active in some sort of church was not uncommon or seen as like controlling.
Well, I think you can watch it from 2024 and people be like, oh, they were overly zealous religious. Like, or it's okay to be a religious person and to raise your family religious and to have those goals in life.
Yeah.
And I
think the thing that came off as cringe is sometimes when you get into extremism of some religions is that it starts to, women become objects for criticism based on their looks, what they do or don't do, how they do or don't dress, or X, Y, or Z. But I will point out that at her age, her family was totally fine with her having a full-time job and working. They couldn't have been as extreme in some cases where that would have been something that women would have not been allowed to do. All right, everybody, we're going to hold for a doorbell ring. And we're back from the interruption. Door-to-door salesman, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bug service.
Okay, so anyways, I just wanted to give a little bit more context because, like I said, when I first watched this, it came off as a little like this man was her father and he was alluded to, and it could have just been the edit, that because of the way she was dieting and caring about her appearance, that somehow that caused her to be disappeared. It felt a little, but yeah, we're going to go on to find out that it does not seem that that is kind of how his full mindset was about this. I don't know. Did you have anything else to say to that before we got interrupted?
No, I think a lot of people, especially when something like this happens, as a parent or someone that cares, you're probably just looking at everything.
Oh, I'm sure.
You're scrutinizing every little thing and just thinking, is that a clue? Is that a clue of what happened to my daughter or to my family member? And is that something that's useful that might help us narrow down? So here's the thing. I would do the same. If something happened, I would redo every
moment in your mind,
conversation, and scrutinize it to the point: is this something I need to
pay attention to?
Exactly.
Yeah. So a client of the law office comes forward. His name is Larry. He claimed that the day before she vanished, he was actually there, like paying a bill or something. And she retrieved a strange call from an unidentified person, and that she appeared to be upset by the caller. In fact, the caller, at least on Unsolved Mysteries, calls twice.
Back to back,
and seems to it gets to her to the point where he says that when he gets home, he feels the need to call like the sheriff or the local police and ask them to just drive by and double check.
You know what my thought process was on this?
Tell me.
Sorry. With the guys looking at the book and this guy saying he called, I think this is truly a good, wholesome, small town people.
Yeah.
That really are concerned about the people around them.
Yeah. I mean, to take stock sometime. Well, we've talked about it. We talked about that girl in Vegas where the guy calls 3 months later and was like, hey, I saw this weird girl or this weird thing in a parking lot. A girl got shoved into a van. I don't know. Maybe it has something to do with it, but I went on vacation. Do you remember that?
No, I remember. And it's
like, why did you wait?
But these people are looking at every little thing and are worried about the people around them. Anything that they feel is off, to the point where they don't just shrug it off. They feel the need to do something.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, I grew up in a big city, so you don't grasp that. But I don't know. That was just my thought.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong, but it seemed that these people.
No, I kind of thought the same thing. I was like, wow, yeah. So another lead the police got was, and this was weird. So shortly before she went missing, the strip mall that she worked in was like, part of it was under construction. So there was like some particle board up. That's probably not the right word for it, but plywood. And there was some text written in spray paint that said, I love you, Cindy, by GW. And it basically faced the window that she sat at. Cindy first noticed it, 10 months before her disappearance, and was visible for a continuous 6 months before being covered up. She felt uncomfortable when a few weeks later, the sign appeared again. The police questioned several people with the initials GW, including a maintenance man who actually happened to have keys to that office. However, there was no evidence that could directly link him to her disappearance. September 1981, a month after Cindy's vanished, police received an anonymous tipster who claimed that she had been held against her will, and the tipster appeared nervous and refused to give any information to the investigator. She claimed that Cindy was being held in a basement of a white house and that there was 2 houses side by side, both white, owned by the same family. Apparently, the family was out of town, but their son was home and he was the one holding her captive. However, the tipster did not give an address. When the investigator tried to ask her for more information, she hung up. A few minutes later, she called back. When another investigator listened on the extension, she hung up. She has not called back since and is unknown if this information is legitimate. And guys, that's kind of where this leaves us.
That's what Unsolved says. We don't know.
Yeah. And they ask one, if you are that person that called, to please call back. They'd like to have a conversation with you. And they would like to, see if anyone saw anything out there. Okay.
All right. Update.
Nothing.
Never found.
Never found. No body, no evidence, nothing. Her car was in the parking lot.
It said she had money in her bank account.
Her social security number's never been used to apply for another job. I did read, and this was, again, just like on a Reddit forum or something. I couldn't find this in any police official report, that another female that worked at the strip mall was named Cindy and had a boyfriend with the initials GW.
I had read that they'd figured out who the writer of the that was, and that he wasn't a suspect.
Yeah.
I did dig into this one a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, to me, the maintenance man who has keys, but again, they couldn't get any connection between him and anything else.
Well, but see, if he's not the one that wrote it and they know who wrote it in that, then he has zero, just because he's a maintenance man that has keys. He didn't write a thing to her. So I guess what I'm saying is, what's the connection between him? The connection just would be that
the doors were locked.
Yeah, but
so
there's
he could
a lot
have
of
let himself in.
Why the doors could be locked or not locked.
Yeah. I'm just saying that puts him already above a percentage of other people if she was taken from there. But that's the problem, guys. We don't know if she was taken from the office. There was a McDonald's nearby. There was like a little food places. She frequently would walk out and go to other shops or go to grab something to eat.
It was the middle of the day.
She could have realized that she left something in her car and walked out to her vehicle. It was broad daylight. She didn't necessarily, this doesn't mean that she was taken from there, but nothing has ever happened. There was a little while there was several attorneys that worked in this office. There was 2 interviewed, but there was one that was not interviewed who ended up being arrested for having ties to drug activity, a drug ring. And there was a speculation for a while that she had overheard something with one of his clients. So then she was, a liability, and that she had been taken out because of that. That seems to be the police's strongest. I mean, I even use the word theory loosely.
Yeah.
Because I can't even find hardly anything other than that being mentioned in a few news reports that the police were kind of working that angle for a while.
Yeah, they worked a lot of angles.
Yeah.
I read an article from the detective that worked it. And let's be clear. The police took this very seriously from day one. They came out, dusted for prints. Like, they dug into this. They did not investigate.
Yeah, this wasn't like, oh, this girl was able to run away from her family, and so she chose to leave on her own. This is not the story in Texas, No,
they took it very seriously from the beginning.
Yeah.
And I had read something about the detective. It's to this day, or at least at that point, he might be passed, but still haunts him. He says, but he even said, we really never
This is the longest standing missing person story in Ohio.
Not Ohio.
Not Ohio.
Toledo.
Toledo.
It's Toledo.
is Toledo, and I think it is.
Oh, sorry. It was Toledo.
Did I get something right and you got it wrong? I think
Oklahoma.
so. Okay. So that's, I mean, really at the end of the day, like that's where it is at. There's nothing out there.
Yeah, it's sad. It's very sad.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, clearly. But that goes back to what you were saying before, the story that you read this morning that I read the other day.
I have a little bit of, I don't want to get into that. Yeah, so
it's wild because we all assume a missing person, something bad happens. And I do think
99.8% of the time that is the case.
But what's the story saying?
Yeah, so a woman, what is it, 60 years ago or something? 64
60s.
Years ago.
Yeah, it was in the 60s.
I actually read a little bit more about it than what the Facebook article I saw or whatever. She hired a babysitter and went to go run errands or do something, like walked to the bus stop and was never seen again.
Yeah.
Left her 2 children with the babysitter.
And her husband.
Yeah. And there was reports that her husband was violently abusive towards her. She'd gotten married at 15. I think she was 18-ish when this all happened. Again, I don't know how old he was.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Because how many times have we talked about these grown men marrying teenage girls?
Yeah.
And then shocking, guess what? It's a toxic, dangerous, abusive relationship. Well, through, I believe at one point, her husband was actually investigated for murder, and they believed this woman to be murdered and dead. She was classified as a murdered woman, and the cold case detective got her file and was working on it to try to solve her murder. Got on Ancestry.com and through some internet sleuthing in the genealogy department, found a sister or X, Y, and Z and ended up coming upon an address and sent the local police to the address. And she phoned him personally like 10 minutes later and was like, yep, I'm her. My husband was abusive. I left and I just never looked back and I don't have any regrets. And I don't want to be connected to anybody. I thank you very much. Have a nice day.
I just read that story. I saw the headline and obviously I read it because I was just curious. Because we've had now multiple missing persons where they've never been found. Same as this one. Was it one of those? You know?
That's the first thing I looked to. Their story was never featured on Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah. But it is just wild that someone just up and disappeared. And we all think, and rightfully so, that something terrible happened. And we just haven't been able to put the pieces together.
Yeah, and she hitchhiked and took Greyhound buses out of the state.
And this is the one story where she did just disappear.
Yeah, so the only thing I struggle with this is that, one, when you got your life together, and I'm not even going to go into the abandoning your children of it all. I was not that woman. Whatever. But one, this gives false hope to families whose loved ones actually did end or a life ended in tragedy based at the hands of somebody else. And two, this man, an abusive husband, okay, he could be held accountable for that, but he was thought to be a murderer for a long time. And we have had men and women who have gone to prison because their spouses or their partner end up missing with no body, no nothing.
Yeah.
So this throws a wrench into those cases and makes those cases for actual real victims to be less likely to get the justice that they need. This woman, at the end of the day, whatever her story was, whatever her mental health was, whatever happened, at some point, she easily could have informed the police that she was of sound mind and she had every right to walk away from her life, and she chose to, but that she was fine. And this would have closed it. But the time, energy, resources, and false accusations. I really struggle with.
Yeah. Well, because like I read the dad of Cynthia.
Mm-hmm.
He's still, at least, I read an article from 2001. And to that day, he still believed his daughter would call.
And that's exactly what I was thinking about.
Because I guess they had a college fund for their kids. And she had a significant amount of money in her college fund. And obviously now that it had grown for 20 more years.
Yeah.
And he refused to have her declared dead. Because to that would release those funds.
Yeah.
But he refuses because he still thought his daughter would come home someday.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And I'm like, it broke my heart.
Yeah. And it's things like this that give false hope.
All right. Are you ready for an awesome story?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is about we're going to be real quick. I am literally going to tell this so fast.
Okay, go.
Because this is about a church explosion. 1950. Well, February 22nd, they tell us there was a choir practice. And Martha Paul was the director of the choir at the West End Baptist Church in Beatrice, Nebraska.
And she sounds like a fun time.
You know, I'll get into it. But supposedly, according to her, choir practice started at 7:30. And you needed to be there by 7:25. No later than you were late. And she expected punctuality from you. From everyone that wanted to sing in her choir.
Yep.
Okay. A week later, March 1st, 1950, everyone's trying to get ready for choir practice. I didn't even write all these stories down. This lady and her husband.
But there was 13 people in the choir or something like that, wasn't there?
They never give an exact number.
I guess actually, this was not like a humongous choir. This was a medium-sized. 10, 15 people, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, one of the gentlemen said 12 to 15.
Okay.
So, anyways, one lady and her husband, they always bring their 18-month-old with them. But the daughter got a stain on her dress and they needed to iron another one. That's the 50s for you.
I know. And in the reenactment, the dad's just like standing around doing nothing while the mom is like holding the baby, feeding it, and ironing the dress.
Here we go. Here we go. Another member of the church turned on a radio show and she got really into it. And she was even supposed to pick someone else up. Another person was supposed to pick another choir member, but she got a flat tire. And another girl just said, I need to take a nap and I just got so tired. So it just seemed that everybody just could not get going to get to choir practice that day. And at 4:30 that day, I guess it was pretty cold. And the pastor had swung by to light the furnace and so that the church would be warm for choir practice that evening. One lady, she said she just had a hard time getting going, but she lived across the street. She was like, I got time. She walks out and at 7:27 p.m., 2 minutes after everyone is supposed to be there, kaboom, the church explodes.
The explosion reenactment was awesome.
It was pretty good. And
they
so,
showed it so many times.
So many times.
Yeah.
Over and over.
They're like, we spent a lot of money in production on this, so we're going to use the whole clip multiple times. Yeah.
So everyone starts running and they're looking for survivors or bodies. And comes to find out, everybody had just decided to be late that day. So was it a miracle? We don't know.
I mean, that group thought it was a miracle, and that's great.
You know what? If you're usually there at that time and you just happen to be late that day, yeah, you're going to think it's...
The fact that the entirety of the group was late is pretty like, yeah, okay, cool. Where does this fit in Unsolved Mysteries?
I'll say, so the older gentleman, he brought up a good point. He says, listen, if we were all in a bus and the bus got a flat tire or something that held us all up, I could believe that is a coincidence. He goes, but when you have, and that's when he says, when you have 12 to 15 people scattered about town all over and just so happen to get preoccupied with all these things that made us all late on the same day, he truly believes that was divine intervention. And you know what? I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
But how that is an unsolved mystery, I don't know. But that's the whole story. That's
okay.
it. That's all I got for you.
All right. I've got a laundry list. We've been downloaded in a lot of new places over the last week. So I'm going to give you our list here and welcome our new locations. West Valley, Utah. Syracuse, New York. Syracuse. North Hollywood, California. American Fork, Utah. Rochester, New York. Chesapeake, Virginia. Green Valley, Arizona, which I'm pretty sure we've been downloaded at before, but Broomfield, Colorado. Post Falls, Idaho. Blackfoot, Idaho. Rock Springs, Wyoming. Grand Prairie, Texas. And Pongul, Singapore.
Wow. Made it all the way over there.
Yeah. So if you're in any of those cities, welcome. Hey.
Welcome.
Yeah. All right. Are you ready for the Signal Mountain murders?
This is wild.
Yeah. Unexplained death is what the headline is.
It's explained.
It is, but that's what the headline is. On the evening of July 9th, 1988, a 22-year-old first-class airman, Kenneth Griffin, not Kenny Griffith Jr., which is what Google kept trying to get me to, what I'm looking for information on this. His 23-year-old friend, Sergeant Errol Smock, and his 49-year-old father-in-law, Richard Mason, planned to ride their ATVs on the trails around Signal Mountain near Chattanooga, Tennessee. We love Chattanooga, Tennessee. We love Tennessee in general.
Yep.
Yeah. Richard's wife, Martha, recalled that they were eager to head out as they still had a few hours of daylight left. Around 6 p.m., they left the home on their ATVs. By the next morning, they had not returned. Their families were concerned as they were experienced ATV riders, and two had rode in the Tennessee backwoods many, many times before. Fearing foul play, their friends and family began searching. This just goes to show, too, how remote and small these towns are, that they didn't bother the sheriff or anything.
They didn't even call.
No, they just started taking care of it themselves. And here's the thing, I will say, when we get law enforcement coming in later, they're going to tell us, they did not know these trails in these backwoods.
Yeah, but they weren't afraid to use the people.
No, they weren't. But I just thought it was these people knew these mountains.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A few hours later, local residents stopped to check a bad tire on Roberts Camp Road, 5 miles from the Mason home. As he looked into the trash dump at the bottom of the nearby bluff, he noticed 3 ATVs covered with blood. That's when they decided to call police. Investigators arrived at the scene and connected that the discovery was to the missing men. As they retrieved the ATVs, a mountain resident approached them and said that he had actually heard gunshots the night before. And he's interviewed on here, and he's talking about how he was annoyed that poaching was starting a little earlier than it should have.
Yes.
Which poaching is illegal, but it was the poachers are getting an early start. But this man was so acute to living on this mountain that the sound of the gunfire, he was able to tell them in which direction or where he thought it on the mountain the sound it came from, which I thought, again, goes to show how much these people knew this mountain.
This man has spent his whole life in those mountains.
Yeah. This man is
and on those trails,
true and through Tennessee boy, and was born and raised.
And the best part is he goes, I heard it from over at the
gate. Yeah.
And I thought it was so funny because I work in the desert.
Yeah.
And we have names for places
that nobody else would know.
No one else knows. We would call it that or that. We actually have a place called the Double Gates.
Oh, really?
And technically, there's not 2 gates there anymore, but there used to be back in the day. But we call it the Double Gates because that's just what we call it.
Yeah.
Even though it doesn't resonate with it anymore.
Yeah. So yeah, if you told me the Double Gates, and so I would spend my whole time looking for at least 2 gates.
Well, we also have a place. It's called the Lock Gate.
Uh-huh.
Now, do you know how many? Because we drive dirt roads. Do you know how many gates are locked?
Oh, most of them.
A lot of them.
Yeah.
Not all of them, but a lot. But that one specifically, we just call the lock gate.
That's funny.
And so I laugh because I'm hearing him. And he's like, oh, I heard it from over at the gate. And everyone that probably lived in that area knew what that area was.
We're going to go to find out in my research that everybody knew. And this was not a real thing. There was no sign there. There was nothing that was named it. It was just, that's what the local people called it.
But there was probably multiple other gates on that mountain. But that one was just called
the gate. So the next morning, investigators searched the area, the gate, where they believed the shots had been fired. They found ATV tire tracks on the ground. However, at first, nothing appeared to be out of the ordinary until they approached the gate, an area posted with a no trespassing sign. One of the investigators noticed a green fly. Again, this goes to show you, man, how backwoods this is.
These boys knew exactly.
Yeah, I'd never heard of this in my life. A green fly landed on his hands. He told them, the boys, we need to pay attention because the green fly indicates that there's some sort of decaying flesh in the area. A short distance away, just off the road, they discovered fresh blood on the ground. Nearby what appeared to be drag marks, and they also found a giant pool of blood which had been covered up by some leaves. A pocket knife belonging to Kenneth was also found nearby on the ground. Investigators were certain that the area near the gate were the crime scene. They also continued searching and found brain tissue and bone fragments at the scene. They were certain that this is where the men had been killed. However, they could not find any bodies. 2 days later, at a dump site 11 miles from the crime scene, their bodies were discovered. Each had been shot and killed by shotgun blasts. Terrible.
Ugh.
Investigators tried to make sense of the evidence, which was scattered over a very large area. The murder site was 3 miles north of the home where they started out at. The ATVs were discovered several miles southeast, and the bodies were dumped by Shuck Creek, which is 11 miles from the crime scene.
All backwoods areas.
All backwoods areas, exactly. Based on the physical evidence, investigators had reconstructed the crime. It is believed that the men were riding along the dirt roads when they were confronted by a killer at the gate. Kenneth was believed to have been shot first, as he was shot on the left side of the head. Richard was killed next and shot once in the chest. Terrible. Earl was killed last, as he was shot in the shoulder and attempted to flee. However, the killer caught up with him and shot him through the heart. After the murders, it was believed that the killer carefully covered up the crime scene and then disposed of the other evidence, possibly, in my opinion, most likely help with an accomplice. They believe that the killer disposed of the ATVs, then returned to the crime scene, retrieved the bodies, and dumped them as well. Investigators theorized that the killer wanted the bodies to be found first in order to prevent them from actually locating a crime scene. It is believed that the bodies were found on Monday instead of Wednesday. The investigators say that they would have likely never tied it back to the gate area.
Yeah, I think they would have eventually.
Yeah.
Because there was
so many people talking about it.
Witnesses.
Yeah.
And anyway, sorry. I'll get into it later.
These residents of Single Mountain fear that the killer is part of their small community. As a result, they are reluctant to come forward with information from this case. They are asking for any people who have any tips to come forward.
Update.
Solved.
Took a while.
Yep. April 15th, 1997. 50-year-old Frank Castile was arrested and charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. He had been considered a suspect literally from day one of the investigation, as he owned the land where the murders had taken place.
Well, if you notice, Robert Stack tells us in the beginning of that story that most of the time the killer is known by the police. They just are waiting for the evidence. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, pretty much. And you could tell the way they tell the story, the police had a lot more than what they were telling. They just didn't quite have enough.
Yeah. So this man owned the land where the murders had taken place. It is believed that the men actually had ridden their ATVs to a known swimming hole that was called Blue Hole, that was like on the very edges of this guy's property. Mm-hmm. So I grew up in a small town. Right. And there are known swimming holes all over the place. And I can almost guarantee you, I mean, my parents' backyard has a swimming hole.
Yeah.
It is private property.
Yeah, but people go there.
And it's posted X, Y, or Z. They try really hard in some of the swimming holes down the way to keep people out because whatever. This guy owned a large piece of property on the side of a mountain with a common swimming hole. I'm sure there were times that he was annoyed that there was trash there or parties there or X, Y, or Z. But there's only so much you can do about it. I actually even read a real estate story once about a lady that bought a house that had like this well-known swimming hole that the community, whoever owned the property before, had let the community people use for years. She was unaware of that when she purchased it and was thoroughly annoyed with how like little care was taken of the property. It was people were coming onto her property, leaving trash, like coming up to their house, having all kinds of issues. And so she fenced it off, and then the city hated her for it. She was the bad person. And eventually she went into agreement where the city bought that piece of land from her and helped put up a pretty nice, beautiful fence along to keep people from crossing the little swimming hole river and coming out on. I get that there is a balance that needs to happen here, but it's really hard to rectify or like if someone has been families for generations have been swimming in the same area. Good luck, dude.
Well, I read that the boy had swam there his whole life.
Whole life. Yeah.
He'd been riding up there.
Everyone had been. Everyone knew about this swimming hole.
It's a small backcountry. That's what people do.
Yeah. One tipster was the female driver of the Chevrolet. Oh, that's right. I forgot to say. So at one point, anyways, there Unsolved Mystery shows this female driver who's like telling people to turn around and go back because there was a car accident or something up the way. They wanted to talk to her. She did come forward.
It was the night the ATVs got dumped.
Yeah. And she said that she was actually directing traffic because her boyfriend's car had broken down.
Yeah, I read that.
Yeah. Okay. Another tipster led them to Marie Hill, who was actually having an affair. Yep, here it is. Yeah. She received an anonymous letter from his wife stating that he was responsible for the murders. He later took one of the letters and burned her, claiming it had harmful information. She agreed to have her house bugged in an attempt to get Castile to confess. However, during their meeting, his wife burst into the mistress's home and confronted them both. A 3-hour recorded fight then ensued between these people, and it was entered into public record because it was part of his first trial.
Golly, that would be
the jury had to listen to 3 hours of this.
Of 3 people fighting over an affair. Golly,
but the mistress got a letter from the wife. Was she threatening him like, my husband murders people, so don't sleep with him? I don't know.
So I read it. That was the letter that she had said to her. You don't want to be with him. She kind of confessed in the letter that he had killed these kids, almost to try to scare her off.
That is crazy to me that that's your play.
That's your play to keep your man?
Yeah. No, thank you. Exactly. So, yeah, I found like, I couldn't find a recording of it, but I did find transcripts of part of it, and it gets pretty wild pretty quick.
I bet.
And they're calling each other out for being murderers and accomplices, and like it gets crazy. Yeah. So there was another witness who came forward who said they saw a woman washing at a local car wash, washing like the Jeep with like full on like a crazy person, like hosing out the back of the Jeep with blood all over it.
So from what it said, it's like a Jeep truck.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I read that too.
And he called, and it turns out that he wrote to the point where this kid wrote down the license plate.
That's how concerned
he spoke to her, and he had told her that she was washing blood out because she had taken some hogs to the slaughterhouse. And this person was like, the F you did. The slaughterhouse is closed on Sunday.
Because he knows that.
Yeah.
Because everyone knows that.
Yeah. So wrote down the license plate and turned it into the police. The Jeep belongs to Castile. So this goose was cooked from the beginning.
There's so much evidence.
Yeah. Here's the thing, because I deleted half of the update because there is a ton of evidence.
So I read I found it's a 29-page like affidavit or whatever of the evidence and the investigation that the police did.
Yeah.
And I skimmed through quite a bit of it. Here's the thing. This guy literally threatened so many people.
Yes. He was literally the town bully. Yes.
Anyone that entered on his property.
Ben, I have right here. He shot at people multiple times. Yes.
With a shotgun.
Yeah. So, to the point, many witnesses came forward that they had been threatened after he found them on their property near the gate or the blue hole. It was discovered that he had started keeping a logbook of his encounters with trespassers, making them sign the book before letting them go. In the book, he wrote down the number of trespassers, their names, their telephone number, and any license plate. 18 witnesses came forward at the trial describing their encounters with him, where he had threatened them wielding a shotgun, in most cases pointing the gun at them, pointing them at their heads, shooting them above, like around them into the air. This man was out of control.
Well, but think about this. Okay. If you're walking or you're riding through someone's property, how do you think he got your name, phone number, and address? He held you against your will at gunpoint.
Yeah.
And you not willingly, but you had to give it to him because you were scared for your life. Just goes to show.
These were ATV trails on a mountain. But I'm sure no one called the cops because they probably thought Castile was just this crazy, annoying old man, and that he was. They would have said about him, "Oh, he's perfectly harmless. Bless his heart." That's what they would have said about this man.
Or they all just thought that's the crazy guy that lives.
But not crazy enough that he got the reputation to not go to the swimming hole.
Yeah. They just were like, don't run into him. If you see him, go the other way.
Yeah. Anyways, he, in May of 1998, he's convicted of the murders and sentenced to life in prison. He was granted a new trial, determining that some of the evidence shouldn't have been admitted. However, once again, in 2003, was found guilty, and then he died in May of 2019.
I also read his son.
What, does he own the mountain now?
No, but I will say his son was implicated, but then
there's no way that man did that on his own.
His son was implicated, but he had an alibi that he worked till 11 and then that he went to his granddad's and slept there that night.
Oh, sure he did.
And his grandpa vouched.
Oh, of course he did.
But his son, I'm not saying just...
this is all alleged.
No. Yeah. This is not alleged, but his son just released a book about this, about how his dad was wrongfully convicted.
No, he wasn't, my dude.
So I saw the book. I don't like giving
No, we
money,
are not giving money to this family.
But I am so curious of what his argument was of how his dad
Well, if he listens to this podcast, he's welcome to give us a call and tell us his story. I will be happy to record it and put it out there for people, but I'm not buying it.
Yeah, I'm just curious of what argument he's willing to make of how his dad.
Yeah, I'd also love to hear how his dad, I guess if he thinks he's innocent, managed to pick up 3 grown men's bodies and put them in the back of a Jeep, and then 3 ATVs.
And get them in the back of a Jeep.
Yeah, he didn't do that alone. Sounds like something that 2 other men might have to help with.
There was rumors.
Like a grandfather and a son.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I can neither not confirm or deny.
Yeah. All right. So real quick, I am going to give our little plugs. So first one is to make sure to take a few seconds to leave us a 5-star rating and review right now until we run out of supplies. If you do post a review, take a screenshot of it, send it to me via Instagram at unsolvedcouplepod or email unsolvedcouplepod@gmail.com, and I will drop in a free sticker that we have and a cute little autographed card from me and Ben. And then make sure to follow us on all social medias. We are on TikTok, on Instagram, and we have a Facebook discussion group that is there to talk about episodes or any and all things true crime. Okay. Ben, what do you have for us for our last story?
I got a wild story for you.
Yeah.
It was a long one too. So
okay, buckle up, Buttercup. We'll try to.
No, I'm not going to make it super long, but
okay.
September 23rd, 1970, we get told about a bank robbery at State Street Bank in Brighton, Massachusetts.
Did you look to see if this bank is still there?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
So if you want to, you can look at that. So there's 2 getaway cars and 3 people enter the bank. I loved how he goes in. This is a stick up. Like
boom, shoots
like
his gun
Woody.
Randomly in the air.
Yeah. So and they make out with 26,000.
They make out.
No,
they made out with the money.
No,
they were like Duck McScrooge, Scrooge McDuck.
Hey, stay.
I'm
focused.
Sorry.
Stay focused. They make away with $26,000. All right, but in the process, a Boston patrolman is shot and later dies from his injuries. So they know who these people are, and they tell us the weird part about this robbery is that 2 of the members were female, Kathy Powers and Susan Sachs, both students at Brandeis University, and that Kathy Powers was one of the drivers and is still wanted. So what? It's almost 20 years later, 18, 19 years after this, she's still wanted. Kathy Powers started school in 1967. And I actually, Robert Stack says this. I thought it was an interesting. He goes, they got involved in the politics of protest.
The politics of protest. That, you know what?
I thought that was a good term.
That was a really good term. Because I think to me, then that speaks for all sides, yeah.
Because so what was going on in 1967, Sierra?
In 1967?
Yep.
Vietnam. Obviously, I'm so smart.
And that was a hot topic. And Robert Stack goes into quite a lengthy history, but it does tie in of what was going on in the country at this time. We had the Vietnam War, which there was a lot of protesting, especially on college campuses at the time. A lot of these protests, they turned into riots. And he then says, we get an interview by an FBI agent who was he was the special agent in charge at the Boston field office there. And there were groups, small splinter groups. He even says, the FBI guy says, they were small and they weren't the driving force, but there was some groups that they decided all of a sudden they wanted to overthrow the government. They thought these protests and they were going to use it as a revolution.
Well, they point out Black Panther. I think most people who studied any sort of history, that the Black Panthers were very synonymous, is a good word, I think, with the kind of riots and stuff that were happening during the Vietnam War as well. They were very outspoken, very big about the government not being involved in war and stuff like that.
Yeah, so you've got all these different groups popping up, and they were kind of the driving force for some of these protests on college campuses and that.
Yeah.
And Susan Powers, she got involved with one of these groups. Even though she was a straight A student, she got a full ride scholarship to this college, but she gets there and she gets involved in these
group mentality. You and I have had many discussions on group mentality and getting swept up in things. It's very easy to happen. I think it can happen to anyone. I don't think anyone's exempt from it, I guess. To me, her background doesn't matter in the fact that it's easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she gets involved in this group, and it's called National Strike Information Center. And what they do, how they explain it on here.
What they do, I don't know.
No, what they do, how he describes it, is they helped organize protest on college campuses.
Yeah.
And they're making phone calls. They're trying to get awareness out so people will show up to these protests. Yeah. And in that process, she meets a guy by the name of Stanley Bond.
James Bond.
And Susan Sachs. They all become close. Stanley Bond is a convicted felon, but he was released and it was part of the rehabilitation process that he got a scholarship to this college. So he's there.
And the rehabilitation part seems to get missed on him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they start all this. They're involved in there now.
Mm-hmm.
They got their little group. Then April 1970 happens, and that was the Kent State incident, where the National Guard shows up, big protest, and open fire. And
terrible. It is a terrible strategy.
Story. And I'm not even here to get into that, but 4 students were killed, and that sparks obviously a lot of people's
it's going to spiral.
Emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where these 3, Susan, Kathy, what did I say? And Stanley, they all it's the revolution. They think this is the beginning of the revolution. Their true fight to overthrow the government. So.
Okay. We not have time to. Their objective was to completely overthrow the government in total, like anarchy, like no power.
So they do explain that so they end up recruiting 2 more people.
Yeah.
So there's 5 of them.
Yeah.
And they weren't technically associated with any specific group.
Yeah.
I think there was a group called the Weather Underground.
Mm-hmm.
And that they had maybe specific purposes, but these 5 kind of took it upon themselves. And when I say this, they then, to the point where they then decide we need to go rob banks to fund our revolution.
But what were they trying to revolute?
I don't know. They don't. That's the thing, is they weren't part of a specific group, so they didn't have a specific purpose.
That's what I'm trying to point out.
I understand that. And that's the point, is they never really came out. I think they just saw it as a way. I mean, here's the thing. A lot of people
why pick up arms and try to create chaos and violence when you don't even know what your revolution is?
Because there's a lot of people that want to use bad things in the world to justify going out and doing bad things because they want to do it anyways. Plain simple.
Yeah. I just thought that the psychology behind it all, I just find very fascinating, to be like, you don't even know what you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Here's the thing, left, right, or center. I don't agree with overthrowing our government, but if that's your objective and your goal, and that's what you're on about, stay focused. But it was like they had nothing. They were just wanting to get people mad. I don't
understand a lot of these people.
Yeah. So. Okay. Anyways,
so they spend the next several months robbing banks. And on September 20th, so just a few days before this bank is robbed, 1970, they broke into a National Guard armory.
That's wild.
And stole explosives, guns, ammunition. And then...
And these people weren't just wielding pistols in the air.
No, they were domestic terrorists.
Yeah.
And then they firebombed the building.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a
big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually, police were kind of onto these people already.
Interesting.
That was a big thing. And now they were looking for them and wanting them for that incident. You firebombed a government building and stole explosives, all that dangerous stuff.
Yeah, anyway. But this makes me think of the freaking Oklahoma City bomber that we just watched. Wasn't that a federal building?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So anyways, so a couple days later, they gear up and they go to rob this bank. So we get Walter Schroeder and Frank Callahan are 2 Boston patrolmen. They go out on patrol that day. They're partners. They're riding around together, and they're out working. We hear then. Do you have these five? I didn't even say the other 2. You got a Robert Valeri and a William Lefty Gilday. They join these other 3.
Mm-hmm.
These 5 people then head out to go rob this bank.
Yeah.
So what happens is Lefty Gilday is in a car watching the entrance of the bank. Kathy Powers is a few blocks away in the switch car.
Mm-hmm.
clearly they had a very
this
good
was
idea.
Well, and it wasn't their first rodeo.
No, because Robert and William Lefty Gilday were both convicted
The fact
felons.
they were able
also.
to get into a federal building and rob firearms to me goes to show their level of expertise and their planning and X, Y, or Z. Yeah.
When you already have 3 convicts running this operation.
Mm-hmm.
So she's in the car several blocks away, and she's gonna be in the switch car.
Yeah.
Then you have Susan, Robert, and Stanley. They go into the building and they rob it. As they're robbing it, someone hits the silent alarm.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when these 2 patrolmen, Walter and Frank, like, hey, man, let's go.
They're out patrol. They get a call.
They're like, we're actually not too far away. We'll
head over there.
They get close, and Lefty starts firing indiscriminately in the street. And so his partner's interviewed, Callahan.
Yeah.
And he says when they rolled up, they couldn't, because you're in a city. We could not exactly figure out where the shots were coming from.
And it's such a weird distortion of sound. So he says
they start running towards where they think the shots are firing from. And he says, Walter turns the corner and realizes he literally walks into where he's shooting from.
Mm-hmm.
And he turns around to try to get cover and is shot in the back.
In the back.
Yeah. Shot in the back.
Coward.
And dies that night or the next morning in the hospital. So, anyways, they start looking for him. Boston PD, they narrow in on these guys. They pick up Valeri pretty quick.
Yeah.
Interview him, and he gives up the names.
Yeah, he gives up the ghost real quick. Yeah.
And 5 days later,
no loyalty amongst thieves. Isn't that like the
best part is that they go back. He hands out $500 to each member of the gang.
Yeah, I had questions about that.
And he says, I'll hold on to the rest.
I got you. Don't even worry about it. And they all take
off. And I'm like, so you only got $500 out of this?
Yeah.
Anyway, so Valeri's picked up. 5 days later, Stanley Bond is arrested in Grand Junction, Colorado. The next day, Gilday is picked up, is arrested in Worcester, Massachusetts, after a high-speed chase.
Yeah.
So, we find out Gilday gets 2 life sentences. He was the guy that was shooting, so
he fired the shot.
He fired the shot. He ends up getting a life sentence on that. Valeri was convicted, does 5 years, and gets paroled.
Okay.
Bond, he was out on
Bond.
And he ended up accidentally killing himself trying to make a homemade bomb, which he was going to use for his escape. But it exploded and killed himself. So
interesting.
Good riddance.
Yeah.
And Susan Sachs was arrested in Philadelphia in 1982.
Okay.
Crazy story about that.
Uh-huh.
All right, I'll say she got 5 years and then probation. Crazy story about that.
Okay.
You know how she got arrested in Philly?
Jaywalking.
She was arrested on the street, and the police just happened to have a meeting that morning where the FBI gave him a flyer of her wanted.
Oh.
And he ran into her on the street and recognized her because he saw the flyer that morning.
That is crazy.
And was like, wait, that's the lady that the FBI.
Wait, you look really familiar.
Yeah. That's how she was arrested in Philadelphia.
That's why they do those things, I guess, right?
So, she got 5 years and then that. So, the last sign, they tell us, those 4, they're still looking for Powers. The last sign they'd ever seen of her is that she was on camera at a bank in Louisville, Kentucky, opening a bank account. Never seen again. She's on the FBI most wanted list. Technically, pretty crazy at that point in time for a woman to be on the FBI. And she, even to this day, is the longest woman that was on the FBI list. She was eventually taken off in the 80s at some time. But that's where Unsolved Mysteries leaves us.
They're looking for the last person.
She's been wanted for 20 years almost.
Okay.
All right. You ready for your update?
Yep.
Captured.
All right.
Kind of captured in the way of she turned herself in.
Okay.
And let's see, October 6th, 1993, she calls a lawyer and she organizes I'll turn myself in.
Mm-hmm.
So she does, her name was Alice Metzner. She was living in Lebanon, Oregon.
That tracks.
Married, had a kid.
Mm-hmm.
They had no idea.
Can you imagine finding out that?
I read that she
Babe, I have something to tell you.
Yeah. So
I got to go away for a little while, but yeah, that's nuts.
So she ended up getting convicted of manslaughter and robbery.
Mm-hmm.
Was sentenced to 8 to 12 years, and she was released in 1999. She only did 6 years. Okay. I have a big problem with that.
Yeah. So
I have a big problem with a lot of these people.
I was going to say, everyone she got next to, we had one guy
only one
blow himself up. One guy the guy that fired the shots got life sentences. The other 2 got 5 years.
Yeah.
And then she got 6 or 8?
8 to 12.
8 to 12, but served 6. Okay.
She got probation for 20 years after she was released.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the judge told her, listen, you are not allowed, period, end of story, to make a dime off of this story. Because technically she lived on the run for 20 something years.
Yeah.
23 years.
To me, that should have been her sentence. Everyone else served 5, but you've been hiding for 20 something years. So that's what you're going to do.
So, of course, in 2019, her probation is up. And what does she do? Instantly writes a book.
And is trying to profit off of this.
Yeah. And about how she was an activist, but now I'm just a grandmother. Like,
well, is her book an apology? Is it a tale of like, hey, it's really easy to get swept up in, like a cautionary tale, like don't be like me, or like...
Here's the thing, I didn't read her book.
Okay.
But obviously there was a ton of articles, CBS News, all these other news places that interviewed her about the release of her book.
Uh-huh.
And I read at least 4 articles.
Okay.
Never once in any of those articles did she apologize or show any sign of remorse that her actions. Now, I understand she didn't pull the trigger, but she was involved.
She was involved
in a group that got a police officer.
And here's the thing. They stole weapons. They stole explosives. They showed up to a bank armed to the teeth.
Yeah.
She contributed to the death of that police officer.
What did you think could possibly happen?
Yeah.
People, when you do things like that, things can go bad and people can die.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, she showed zero remorse. She's now living in Massachusetts.
Well, what was that one quote that you said? I need to be known as a good person.
Yeah, in one of the articles, she is quoted like, "I just need people to know that I am a good person. I need people to know I am a good person." I was like, okay, narcissist.
Yeah.
I mean, anyways, here's the thing. I don't know this lady, but it's a little frustrating that this police officer was a 19-year veteran and had 9 children.
Yeah.
And this guy's just out patrolling.
Well, you went on to get married and have kids and never thought at any point, maybe... Like, yeah, I agree. I agree. And from my understanding now, the laws have changed where if someone is killed in the act of a felony taking place, regardless of whether you pull the trigger or not,
you can be held responsible
for it.
Yeah. But it was 1970. I don't think those laws were in place at the time. So I mean, here's the thing. I'm glad she got caught. I'm glad she did time. Clearly, that was what the law said that she was going to do. She did it. And now she can go on and do what she wants. And I think it's funny that the minute she can make a buck out of this, she does.
She does.
I mean, I guess I shouldn't say, I don't think it's funny. That's me being sarcastic. But
yeah.
It's
It's on par.
It doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah.
But what can you do?
Just like OJ writing his book.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing. That guy's.
Look at me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the other thing, too. Like, this has been, like, lack of a better words, dead and buried for a while. And you want to bring it all back up for your own personal benefit.
One of his kids went on to be a detective. I think several of them went on to be police officers at Boston PD. And like, I read an article where they asked and they said, I refuse to give any type of
credence to that. All right, guys. Well, that is our episode. We are going to now move on to our little question at the end of the podcast. All right, babe, are you ready?
I'm ready.
If money was no object, what is something frivolous and ridiculous and stupid that you would have? We're not talking Lamborghinis or mansions or a farm and blah, 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 blah. That's all like you win the lottery and you are forced to maintain your same lifestyle, but you're allowed to have one thing that you can dump your money into, and it's so stupid.
Helicopter.
You would have a helicopter?
They're so awesome. They're a lot of fun to fly around in. And if I could just go places in my helicopter.
Oh, I'm just gonna go get you. Like you live in your same standard, 4-bedroom, 2-bath, white picket fence house, and you're like, oh, I'm just gonna go down and hop in my helicopter. That's a good one.
Yeah, helicopter. I think it'd be awesome.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, I don't know where I'd park it, but
yeah.
I mean, if you told me I would buy a house that I could have a helicopter.
Nope, can't have a house with a helicopter. You can have. I couldn't really. You could have I'll let you have an airplane hangar.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Even better than a helicopter. I don't know why, but that would be awesome.
All right, are you allowed to own a Blackhawk?
Probably not.
Probably
not.
I
have no idea, but
if anyone out there knows that, please let us know.
But no, because that one, that's too big. That's too big. That's a little ridiculous.
Oh, that's okay.
Just a little one.
You want just like a little A-star, a little
just a little thing.
Yeah,
that I can hop in and just
putter around in. Okay.
So, what's yours?
I have 2.
Okay.
I would have in my garage a tiny little area with a crushed ice machine and a Diet Coke fountain machine.
That's a great one.
And I'd have cups and straws that I could walk out there and fill it up and on tap basically whenever I want, right?
Yeah.
And then the other
McDonald's Diet Coke.
McDonald's Diet Coke, yep. Then the next thing that I would have is I would have a standing 2-hour massage appointment twice a week.
I was going to say a masseuse at all times.
I might not make it to every appointment. They'll get paid. Doesn't matter. But they are on retainer twice a week. And I can go and I love a 2-hour massage, which is so ridiculous. It is a treat that I get like every couple of years. But if I had where money was no problem, but yeah, that would be my secondary expense of where serves nobody but me, and it's completely wasteful, but I would be okay with it.
I don't blame you.
Diet Coke and massages is all I need to be.
And I just want a helicopter.
And you want a helicopter. All right, everybody, that is our episode. Ben and I will see you back here next week when we recap another episode of
Unsolved Mysteries.
Bye.